put the social back into work. Social is not parties and nice to have, and it is the work. It will always be the work. I went and spoke at a conference just before Christmas, people coming together in an organization from 12 different offices. And how many of those people said, oh gosh, it's so difficult to take time out of work, but it's great when we're here. And I could see them all talking, they're all in the same company in different places. I said, this is the work. This is
work.
Yeah.
This is it. This is what it's about.
This is the most important work. This is not time out.
So, delighted to be joined by Tracy Camilleri, one of the authors of The Social Brain, which explores how we're actually wired as humans to connect, belong and work in groups, and what that means for leadership, for culture, and most importantly, for performance. Tracy is a co-founder of Thomson Harrison and an associate fellow of the Oxford University Saïd Business School. And her work brings together psychology, neuroscience, and real organisational practice across diverse organisations and industries to show how groups really function when we design around people, not just structures. So Tracy, your work has put real science behind something that many of us, instinctively understand, I guess, which organisations don't succeed because of the systems alone. It's because of the quality of all those relationships and people inside them, right? That's the key point. So Tracy, welcome. And it's lovely to meet you.
Thank you. Great to be here, Sarah.
And I've got lots of questions for you. I just want to say, this is such an important, I think for me personally, not just for the business, but and the audience, which is connection has always been a thread through all of my work. I've seen again and again that when people feel genuinely connected, when they think better, right? They challenge more honestly, they show up differently. I'd say, and that's why Read to Lead exists, and we don't just read for knowledge, we read together, because shared ideas they create better conversations, they build stronger relationships. So it's really lovely to meet you and to have read your work, because it's something very close to me personally.
Well, it's great to be here. You do, really important work through Read to Lead as well. So I think we come at these questions from a very similar trajectory.
Definitely. Okay, loads of questions for you. Let's. I think that the first one is you talked about the number, the small group piece, and I guess if that the 150 being the natural limit for meaningful relationships, and I work with, as you do, a lot of large organisations. Looking at how they build their culture at scale, and so that values don't just sit on the wall. How do they do that then? How does that work when 150, and these are, organisations that have thousands of people?
Well, that is the $1 million question, I think. Robin Dunbar, who's our co-author, always says that he's the only living scientist to have a number named after him, the Dunbar number, as you say, 150. And that is pretty much, give or take, the limit that any one person has of the number of reciprocal relationships. Obviously, we can recognize people, we know their names, but beyond that number. But it's amazing how consistent it is and how it comes up again and again and again. And I think, we have become increasingly interested in organizational design. The traditional design is the pyramid, and we are, as a species, attracted towards hierarchy. There are the sort of teal, very flat structures, and we have become interested in how you scale through fractals, thinking about, and it's how the natural world scales, of course. Look at the top of a piece of broccoli or whatever. How we and how that conceptually changes how we think about large numbers. We are at our best as human beings in small groups where we're known, where we feel reciprocity, where there's shared sense of purpose and so on. So I think what that requires, though, if you are to scale through fractals, through smaller groups, is a really strong sense of shared purpose. And rather than a focus on rules, a focus on strong principles. And that then allows you to to devolve leadership, we talked to Gore-Tex, W.L. Gore, actually set up a new plant every 150 people, which is a very extreme way of thinking about fractal. And they had this notion, for example, of waterline decisions. Any decision that people felt would damage the ship underneath the waterline had to be taken at the top of the organization. But any other decision could be anything above the waterline could be taken by these more fractalized kind of units. And I love that idea. I think that, we actually need local difference, but kind of global coherence. And, it becomes a virtuous circle where we, have trust for in small groups, and we are more able then to invent and to take risks together and so on. And I, as I was saying to you, Sarah, just before we started, it's incredibly efficient to organize and think like this. You don't get free riding. That the sort of passengers are no longer there. And, so we've been doing a lot of work in thinking about organizational design. And I think it's a moment for organizations to rethink how they conceive of, the shape of how people come together and so on. I don't know if that's an answer, but yes, it's a small. Like you can grow huge if you think like that, and if you act like that.
There's no limit, but it's how you structure it around that.
Exactly.
So the point you were mentioning there around local differences and global coherence. I'm interested in, how do you create as a leader teams? It's that balance, isn't it, between just enough in common so that you can create that trust, that people can connect and understand and relate to each other. But then there's enough difference to kind of spark that new thinking. I guess the balance, like you said, between trust and then how that links into innovation, how that drives innovation.
I think, again, that's a great question of how you create that balance. And I think the word is balance, and that's an act of leadership. And I think you've got to go back again to numbers. I don't think we think about the size of teams enough. Many of the teams, we encounter are either too big or in some cases too small. And we did a lot of work about thinking of sort of matching team size to task. And, 4 is the best number if you want to have a conversation, for example. It's no surprise that that's the most frequent number for restaurant bookings. 5 is a great number if you want to move very, very fast. We can mentalize, we can understand not only what our teammates are thinking, but their motivations for thinking that. But that's heavy cognitive work. You can't go much beyond 5 or 6 without needing to debrief and stop. And so it's a great number for creative teams, a great number for crisis teams, but not good. Your point, Sarah, how do you get that, different sorts of thinking? They're, 12 to 15 and, the number of disciples, the number on a jury or whatever. They're, and the leadership task there is facilitation. And we're not very good at that as leaders. We're not taught to be elegant facilitators, to bring in all the voices. And you look at some of those huge board tables that have got, 25 people on them. Of course, you're never going to get all the voices in the room. And it's interesting, as we've been going around talking about our book, how many people come up afterwards and say, "Oh, can you help us exclude people?" And that sounds so bizarre, but actually, how do you kindly exclude people who are just sitting there, through meeting after meeting in teams that are much too big, not really contributing? And so I think thinking about numbers, thinking about beginnings and endings as well. It's amazing how poor we are at really structuring brilliant beginnings, where we really understand what everyone can contribute. We work quite a bit with a conductor called Peter Hanke, and it's amazing how people start to conduct. They don't think about the beginning, and they don't think about the end either. They kind of walk off, and the choir's still singing. So I think that's another really important point. But, back to your point about how do you get the balance? And I think those thresholds are really, really important. And it is an act of leadership to keep the balance between sort of intimacy and, the disruption that comes with innovation and change.
So it goes back to size again. That's a core component, as you've just described. But as you said, it's part the number, and then it's the people in it, how you excluding those that can contribute, or knowing where the diversity sits within the minds of the 5 or the 4. But the point that you also said there that is around how you draw that out. That's the key, isn't it? Whether it exists there or not, people might have that diversity of thought, but if you're not extracting it, if the leader isn't facilitating it, you'll never get that knowledge sharing and that innovation coming through, I guess.
When I was much younger, I was a teacher. And I was still interested, obviously, in learning and teaching, but I was teaching kids, A-level students. And I became really, really interested in why it was that some groups actually made one another better. They became more than the sum of their parts, and they lifted everyone's game. And some groups just seemed to kind of snipe at each other and bring one another down. And I thought to myself, I was very young then, is this just happenstance? Is this serendipity? Or can you actually create the foundations for that to happen every time? And that, I suppose, that sort of question that I asked at a very young age, and we did all kinds of experiments around that. I was very lucky to be able to be in a group where we did really interesting experiments that have informed, everything that I do. And I think when we came together with Robin and Sam, the thing all 3 of us were interested in is how do you create the conditions for a group to be more than the sum of its parts? Because, of course, that's free energy. That is productivity. That is performance. That's a gift. And that's where we, in our research, came up with this notion of the Thrive model. And it's just intuitive. Nothing is surprising about the fact that the best thriving teams had a shared sense of purpose that they could articulate. They shared values. They felt they were learning and progressing. There were opportunities for connection, as you said, to get to know one another, to understand what it was that was, that each one brought to the group. They had a sense of belonging, that each of them contributed to a story, that the story would be different without them. And there was a sense of culture. This is who we are. We've got rituals. We know who we are. And that came again and again and again. And those are things I think that leaders can really focus on. And it's so efficient when you do that. So we've been very interested in helping leaders to create those conditions for thriving, quite frankly.
I love that Thrive model. It so simply lays it out. And to your point, you're curating that. And it goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is designing the beginning and the end, and thinking about designing the teams, thinking of designing the beginning, designing the end. Just on the point of belonging, because I have this conversation with leaders all the time, and I guess, sometimes there's a feeling that certain phrases like sense of belonging, they're well used. And what does that really mean, practically? It's very theoretical. What have you seen that works really well on a practical level, where people have created that sense of belonging?
I think it's, we all know that feeling of being left out. It's a childhood feeling. And it is so constructed. And I think, in a hybrid world, we perhaps can feel that even more. I think it does. And where I've seen it really well dealt with is, again, back to this question of beginnings, of really, really well thought through kind of onboarding into teams, for example, where it's not just, oh, hi, this is who we are. It's also, we need to find out who you are and how you're going to change our story, and thinking of how the team is enhanced by someone joining it. Also, when people leave, I think we tend in our world, Sarah, we tend to think of individuals, we promote individuals, we reward individuals, we hire individuals, or to think of the whole. But we don't really think, I think, as designers in terms of teams. And I think we miss there the great added performance and productivity that comes from thinking like that. Sorry, I could just add, we did a wonderful set, just as a sidebar, a wonderful set of workshops in collaboration with the V&A on belonging, where we came at it from the side, and we worked with some of their brilliant curators. So, for example, the keeper of arms and armaments, we thought about how, and he brought out these medieval swords and this armor of horses, and people were lifting these things up. And we used that as a way to think about how, at the office, we sometimes don't think about the daggers that we have in our back pockets, or the way we arm up,
The armour we carry.
Yeah. The armour we carry. We worked with the keeper of medals and thought about who do we still give medals to, and who don't we give medals to that we should. And so, we had one workshop called "How to Say I Love You in Greenlandic," and we it was really a means by which we had real conversations about belonging, and also a sense of not belonging as well, but in a fun and thought-provoking way, actually.
Yeah, very experiential, what you just described there. It's so sensory, isn't it? And you say that we all have a sense of belonging, not belonging. We all know when we weren't picked for the club, the group at school, and it cuts deep. And it's the same thing, isn't it? To bring those the senses to people to really understand that. A couple of things I'd like to pick up on before we wrap up. You mentioned there about intimacy. Sorry, a moment ago you mentioned about intimacy, and I think those close relationships. I mean, friendships at work is one of the biggest links to productivity, isn't it, and performance. Having a good friend and someone, that's so important to have those close relationships to drive that engagement with people. Is the well-being factor, the performance and efficiency and effectiveness. But at the same time, I sometimes hear from leaders that they wrestle with where the line sits between personal and professional, how you balance that, how you keep it back to balance again, isn't it? Any thoughts and advice on that, how you balance the personal and professional to keep those close relationships going?
I think, again, that's something that comes to us many, many times. People saying, can you help? We're finding it really difficult to give feedback, developmental feedback. It feels, we don't want to be critical. Our culture is a very warm one, and so on. And I think it is a real problem, because well-delivered developmental feedback is, of course, a gift, a total gift. And I think it does come back again to, yes, you need intimacy and warmth. And as you say, absolutely need friendship at work. And you need the time and the space to make friends at work. And that is hugely important for retention and, all those sorts of things. But I think, again, if you have the unit of identification as the team, as the group, and you have a shared sense of purpose, and you have a shared sense of values, then you can map the professional trajectory of all the members of that team and the team itself against those things, rather than against the personal relationship that you have with them. So, if their performance is perhaps trailing, it's not, good. It's actually, we've got this shared thing that we're doing together. Let's actually, let's look at it against those sorts of professional issues. And I think You don't have to choose one or the other, but I think getting the balance right is difficult. As you say, it really is difficult. And I think without an articulated, this is what we're all trying to do, and this is what we're all contributing towards, it can become difficult in a frictionless world. And it is difficult to give feedback.
And I think sometimes we overuse the word balance. I think there's no perfect balance, is it? It's never going to sit on the
No.
And you're always going to sort of stray, but it's a level of comfort with that as well, and navigating that.
Yeah.
But your point around designing that and being intentional, which you've said a few times now, designing that intimacy, those relationships, that time and that space. And you mentioned as well in the previous question, you touched on hybrid. I guess, I just want to bring that one up.
Yeah.
If you look at how humans form those relationships and groups, how can leaders actually design hybrid? This is not going away. Hybrid's not going away. So how can they design hybrid in a way that actually works?
I think of leaders as designers. I absolutely do. Designers of space and time and relationship and all sorts of things. I mean, if Robin Dunbar was on this call, he would say, "Do you know what? Human beings are social animals. We need one another. And we will all be back together again. We need to. I'm with you. I think hybrid has its look at us here now. I don't know where you are, Sarah, but I'm certainly not in the same room as you. But certainly, hybrid relationships degrade over time. And I think to make it work, I always think about humans coming together in terms of kind of physics, chemistry, and biology. We can convene the physics, the dynamics. We can convene remotely. We can, do all kinds of tasks and so on very efficiently. But the chemistry of coming together, where we release hormones and endorphins, we feel good. There are bonding mechanisms. When we eat together, when we tell stories together, when we walk together, do anything in synchrony.
Sing together. Yeah.
Sing together. Goodness. Yeah, we've done a lot of that. It's very hard to do that remotely. You can. And actually, you can, we've had lots of kind of sending people cabinets of curiosity and having a drink together online. And I think a lot of us did that during COVID. But there's also the biology of what we as human beings are brilliant at doing, what our brains are wired to do, to imagine, to connect with each other, to communicate in a nuanced way, to be able to think about the future conceptually. So I think making hybrid work, and this isn't skating out of your question, involves us also making face-to-face work. It has to matter. And I think about the next generation as well, and back to leaders as designers. You can't go to work and have all the bosses with their doors shut in their offices. We need to go back to the sort of medieval apprentice, where we're working together. When we come together, it needs to matter, and we need to design that, and we need to be sort of topping up the chemistry and the biology and the physics, thinking about the dynamics of things. So I think particularly for the younger generation, this wholly hybrid, this wholly virtual way of working is really problematic. We need to fall in love. We need to make friends. We need to do all those sorts of things. And increasingly, as community halls and all sorts of things have less and less funding, work is a really important part of society for us to do those sorts of things. So I think we need to be intentional.
And it's the physicality. You said you pick up on the energy, those endorphins. It's biologically it is changing the way you're thinking, your cells, everything. And you only get that true chemistry in person, don't you? I know that you mentioned there, we were good, companies were good and not good at doing that in COVID. But there's loads of learnings, but it can drop off, doesn't it?
It can drop off. And I think we can be creative about using the brilliant things, the breakout rooms, having small conversations with one another, institutions need gossip in order to self-regulate. Robin's research shows about 66, I think, or 2/3 of our conversation is on social topics, despite the fact we spend hours agonizing about the numbers and the spreadsheets and so on. Actually, we need to talk about people with people. And if you cut that out of, our virtual interactions, I think things start to thin out. And if you want people to do more than execute predetermined tasks or to work alone, you have to think about not using digital tools lazily. I personally find having the AI readout of meetings sent to me, yes, it's a tool, but actually what it misses is that human nuance of what was really important and and actually I sort of stopped reading. So not using digital tools lazily, but thinking about how you can use them creatively to reinforce relationship.
And it actually gives you that space to do that because, everything else is taken care of. It's got the detail, it's got the notes, it's got all the actions. Well, what was the nuance? What was the feeling in the conversation? Where do you want to take that relationship? It should free up that thought then, if used wisely. I like that as well. Make hybrid work is about making face-to-face work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy. Last question, because Read to Lead is all about bite-sized insights, bite-sized actions, small things that we can change today, Monday morning, take back with us into the office. What would you say is, if a leader was, just thinking about one idea they could take from the social brain and act on it this week? What could they do differently? Like one thing that you've seen that has had a really impactful, had a really big impact. What would you say to that?
I think I would say to any leader going into the office on Monday, take just half a step backwards, And it's incredible what a difference that makes. It allows you just a broader purview of what's going on. And it's amazing how, everyone is just head down into, tasks and targets and individuals and whatever. Just take half a step back. And with that little bit of space that changes the dynamics, start to think in teams. How can you make the environment support your teams better? And, that involves you thinking about where's the energy, like a heat seeker, where's thinking about the spaces in between rather than just the tasks, thinking about principles. And then the last thing I would say is put the social back into work. Social is not parties and nice to have, and it is the work. It will always be the work. I went and spoke at a conference just before Christmas, people coming together in an organization from 12 different offices. And how many of those people said, oh gosh, it's so difficult to take time out of work, but it's great when we're here. And I could see them all talking, they're all in the same company in different places. I said, this is the work.
This is work. Yeah. This is it. This is what it's about.
This is the most important work. This is not time out. And I think just being really brilliant about how it doesn't mean you need to change everything. Don't have a sandwich at your desk. Go and eat lunch with someone else. You have to eat lunch anyway, if you've got a problem, go for a walk and talk it through with someone. The fact you're in synchrony creates endorphins. It's a bonding mechanism. You're getting 2 for 1. There are simple things you can do, but you have to just take a little step out of the morass, in order to be able to see how important it is.
Love that. What a great wrap up. Take half a step back just to think, give yourself the space to think and put social back into work. It is the work. I love your passion, Tracy, and insight. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for sharing. I've really enjoyed it. And looking forward to sharing this and speaking further. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.